Welcome, everyone, to the big debate on the new Greater Cambridge Local Plan. Thank you all for coming. And it's lost and come back. We are very excited to be holding this event. It's the first time we've ever done this, so I'm quite pleased that the house is full. I am Councillor Tumi Hawkins from South Cambridgeshire District Council, and this is Councillor Katie Thornborough from Cambridge City Council. We both are the lead members for planning in our respective councils. It is really important to us that the new local plan draws on the brightest and best ideas from our communities for our future. We know we have to make some big and probably very difficult decisions about our future, how we support our communities to grow more resilient, how we lessen our impact on the climate and on the environment, and how we continue to support our businesses to make sure that they grow strong, but that they work for everyone. And we're quite lucky in this area to have a huge range of organizations who have put time and effort into thinking about how our future might go.
We wanted to give this opportunity to some of our groups to share their ideas on a public platform and to discuss some of the big issues and challenges with each other and with you. The groups will be on stage tonight were selected from 25 applications, which shows what an appetite there is for this kind of debate, and we hope we'll do more in the future. We're really excited to see how this debate and this evening unfolds. But over the next few months and years, we will develop the new local plan. Please join the debate online too, on Twitter and any other social media. Please use our hashtag #GCLocalPlan. We'll be gathering all the posts as part of our reporting on the consultation. Thanks again for being part of this conversation. The more you get involved, the better our plan will be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the staff and officers at Greater Cambridge Planning Service, thank you all for making your way through the rain and the cold this evening. As Tumi and Katie have said, this is a really exciting opportunity, we think, for ourselves to hear from you around this plan. And tonight, we're going to hear 7 quick-fire presentations from local groups in what is known as Petakucha. Basically, the slides will be, there are 20 slides and there are 20 seconds per slide. And Paul and my job, Paul Frainer, the Assistant Director responsible for delivering the strategy, always wanted to be on stage. Last seen in a pantomime dressed rather similarly, in fact, to the way he's dressed this evening. But we will see a number of presentations from people tonight, and we're looking forward to the discussion that will happen from that. So, sorry? Introduce myself. Sorry. I am really sorry. I've introduced my colleague Paul Frainer. I am Stephen Kelly, so I'm the Joint Director of Planning for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, and a number of my team are to the rear. Paul and I hopefully will be able to curate the event and ask you and compare the event tonight. To start off with, though, I'm afraid before we get to the interesting bit, I just thought it was probably helpful to do a little bit of an introduction around the context of the plan and set some of the scene. And in a way, I've given myself the same task as everyone else, which is to try and talk for 20 seconds. And Hannah, sitting behind the scenes, is staring at me as we speak. So, little bit of context. What is Greater Cambridge? I appreciate most of you may well be familiar with that. but look at the arrow on the right-hand side. We are a growing place, and this population, the population of this place is going to increase. And that means obligations on all of us, in a sense, as to how we're going to address that. We have a growing economy driving that population growth. We are successful in some measures, but obviously, as you can see, that growth in population, the growth in visitors that we've seen, the number of businesses that appear to be multiplying here is causing some of the challenges that we want to talk about. There are opportunities, and the City Deal for Greater Cambridge is part of a package of measures that are seeking to try and ensure that we manage that growth effectively and in a managed fashion. We have, nevertheless, agendas to deliver more homes. We hope that's not the main basis for coming forwards with the local plan, but we have a need to plan for homes. We have growth targets that are set by the current plan and growth targets that we're going to have to think about for the new plan in terms of defining the population. There's a lot happening already, isn't there? Some of you are from the villages of South Cambridgeshire, some of you are from the city, and you will have seen a number of these sites and developments upon them and will have views about the consequences and how we manage that. But looking ahead, we have, we think, or we hope, started a conversation which is more progressive and engages with these 4 key themes that you, over the time that I've been here, have told us are important to you. Climate change is very current in Cambridge at this moment in time, but it's a reality and it poses a series of challenges, whether that's not just in terms of changes in temperature and reversing or seeking to address the concerns of climate change, but also starting to think about adaptation and the consequences of how we manage within a potentially changing environment. How do we address the consequences of modern living and its consequences for carbon and the footprint that increasingly the developed world is having as it looks forward to growth. We have heard from you around biodiversity and green spaces, and we're suggesting that's another one of the key themes for the local plan looking forwards. There are fantastic assets in the city and in South Cambridgeshire. We want to double nature. Both councils have made commitments around that, and even at a national level, there are aspirations to improve and enhance biodiversity. What does that mean as we plan for the future? We have issues of inequality in the city and actually in the district. And we have an aging population and reducing public sector resources at time. What do those matters mean? And not forgetting, and we've got some speakers tonight who I'm sure will touch upon this as all of the previous issues, we have a fantastic place, both villages and city, a landscape that is precious and subject to protection and controls. How do we, looking forwards, ensure that we don't harm or undermine those special places? And so there are a series of choices that the local plan is going to have to consider. Our document available online starts to highlight these choices, and those choices in some respects reflect a series of polarized positions. We suspect, as with the last local plan, we might need to think about elements of each of them as we consider climate change, well-being, environment, and place. And there are some scenarios that we've tried to capture in our document. There are also new forms, new thinking. Someone may well mention garden communities this evening. There are different views about what the most appropriate way to go forward with these spatial choices would be. There are challenges that we've highlighted, whether it is a return to garden settlements and some of the kind of founding principles of garden communities, whether it is more developed and more contemporary thoughts around integrated and networked growth that you'll see on the slides. There are questions around density and scale and the infrastructure that underpins the delivery of those, not just survival components of a home and roads, but actually the cultural enrichment, the community amenities and so on that require populations and require future investment and change. And there are different models for how we might see that growth happening, be it through polycentric or multiple locations clustered together, which we can see in the slides in front of you, or aspirations around much more sophisticated mixes of land use and settlement clusters linking together. And some of the examples that you can see on the screen reflect some of that recent thinking. Much of that follows after the current local plan was put together. The most recent of examples, the prize-winning Velocity concept, is in many respects a reflection of the changes that have happened as we've migrated away from vehicles to starting to think about more localized and more sustainable concepts. So I'm doing my best to stick to time, Paul. This is the start of the process. We want your views. We're really looking forward to hearing presentations this evening from everyone else. And we hope that you will enjoy what you hear this evening. Thank you.
Many thanks, Stephen, and thank you all for coming along. There's a big group of you in here tonight. I think we're fully sold out, so thank you for all making the time. I promise not to break out into any panto songs, but I think that was a really clear view of the themes that we're going to be discussing, but also the challenges that we might have going forward in making this plan. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome one of our first community organisations up. And can you please welcome Tariq Sadiq from Cambridge Commons to come and talk about their ideas for the new local plan process.
Yes, hello. I'm the one that decided to wear the dark clothing against the dark background today, so you're probably just going to see a disembodied face for a while. I'm here to argue for putting the fight against inequality at the heart of the local plan. I represent the Cambridge Commons. We're a group of volunteers who are concerned citizens, not experts. We campaign to raise awareness of inequality. We campaign for research to uncover the effects of inequality, and we campaign for action to try and reduce inequality. That's actually the last slide, not the first one. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So a lot of our work stems from the research that was done a few years ago now that was represented in this book, The Spirit Level. That collected data from around the world which showed what the impact of inequality was on all sorts of social and economic indicators across the board. So the more unequal the society, the greater, the worse outcomes in health, in mental health, in physical health, in crime, in education, and a whole range of other indicators. So inequality is one of the driving forces behind many of the social problems that we face today. This is the most sophisticated graph I could find. No, it's not true. But it neatly represents the problem, and that's represented across a whole number of different countries and also within countries as well. So why Cambridge? Well, as everybody knows, we're the most unequal city in the UK. In 2018, I think 2 years running. So we have some particular problems which are related in some respects to the growth and the success of the city, but also, despite the affluence, we have some really entrenched divisions within our city. So you can see from this graph, the life expectancy is about 11 years between the wealthiest and the least wealthiest, most deprived areas of our city, which is frankly unacceptable, whichever way you look at it. Now, we don't really necessarily need data or evidence to show whether inequality is good or bad. We all feel it. We all see the effects of it. We notice people homeless on the street. We notice the effects of people struggling to get by. Now, one of the arguments is around whether growth is good or bad for inequality, and there's a lot of debate around this. And it's true, the more wealth we bring into the city, the more big employers we bring in, the more demand there is for housing, and it pushes up prices, and it drives people out. So how do we reduce inequality through the local plan? Well, it's not easy. We don't have all the answers, but there are certain things that we can do. First of all, we can make sure that all our planning is joined up. So we have a single integrated plan for equality in the city. Now, this particular report, which I recommend to you, talks about place poverty. And that is about how poverty is reflected through the way that you design a community, the way that the number of facilities that you have, the way that you design communities to be together rather than separated. And it's all about how you can use good planning and good urban design to reduce the inequalities that are inherently built into our urban environment. Now the slides are going to get less exciting because I ran out of ideas and images. But I just want to go through a number of key things that need to be built into our thinking around planning. So first of all, energy efficiency. It's gone now, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And also this concept of homelessness and how you tackle homelessness. I commend the City Council's initiative to introduce Housing First, which is literally about getting people into homes straight away rather than making them go through hostels and temporary accommodation. That helps with getting people off the street and gives them support to get back on their feet. Good urban design I've already talked about. So how do you make communities so that they're safe, they're well lit, they have community facilities where you have different generations living together and supporting each other? Community facilities like children's centres, libraries, all of those things are really, really important in terms of binding a community together. Of course, we all know that public transport is a major issue in the city, and there are lots and lots of plans about how we're going to deal with that. But the key thing here for inequality is that it has to be affordable. And one of the things that we've really not done enough to support is buses. We've cut bus services, and buses are used by poorer people more than the more affluent. So this is essentially embedding and entrenching inequality when we cut bus services. We need safe places for children to play. There is a clear link, the research shows, between traffic accidents and child poverty. I did some work on this a few years ago when I was a councillor. I've already mentioned that community facilities bring people together, but there's a further point about this, in that in bringing people together, you also mobilize them to take action. So communities that are not involved find it harder to band together and argue their case. So more affluent communities are better organized and can come to events like this and make their case. Not so much in poorer communities, we have to strengthen their capacity to do that. There are flaws in the planning system, we know. It's very complicated. Unless you're a professional, it's very hard to find your way and navigate through the planning system to make your voice heard. We know that developers can often get away with a lot. So they can use loopholes, they can use solicitors and lawyers and so on. They can appeal and get away with things. But finally, coming near to the end now, I wanted to re-emphasize the division. You can't really see this very well, but it shows that the concentration of social housing is in particular parts of the city, and in the other areas you've got more wealthier, more pricey private accommodation, and that leads to a process of ghettoization, which we've got to really think carefully about. It's about concentrating poverty. The more you focus social housing and other housing in particular parts of the city, the more ghettoization you're going to get. What we need are mixed communities where lots of people from different backgrounds live together in the same community and are linked together. There are things we can do. There are great examples. For example, this development, Goldsmith Street in Norwich, was a great example of really integrated council housing. And finally, the last slide, which you've already seen, get involved. We're always looking for volunteers for the Cambridge Commons. We're doing a lot more work around messaging about how we talk about poverty, how we talk about inequality. We're doing some work with the Cambridge Student Hub on that, and we need people to get involved to do more research and help us with campaigning. Thank you.
Thank you, Tariq. That's fantastic, and really a great start to this evening's discussion with some really thought-provoking comments there and some passion. We're now going to hear from Sue Rogers from the Local Access Forum, who's representing both the Forum but also the Ramblers and the British Horse Society, to speak about how they feel the local plan should address accessibility. Sue, welcome.
Thank you very much. Don't start the slides just yet. Right, good evening, everyone. The Local Access Forum is all about access and amenity to the countryside. A full audit of publicly accessible open space and green space needs to be done now to inform the local plan development process at its start-up. Otherwise, how can we design best if we don't know what we've got? Some work was done on this a few years ago. Let's pick it up again. I'll time that well, the slide hasn't moved yet. The county has the lowest amount of publicly accessible open space per head of population in England. That's appalling when we've got so much countryside here. There are many more footpaths, walkers only, than there are bridleways, walkers, cyclists and equestrians, and hardly any of either in the northeastern part of the county. Let's correct this. If medication, getting into the outdoors is very advantageous. Current television programmes, How to Live Well, etc., they all extol the mental and physical health benefits to humans of the great outdoors. We need to design our world so that people can get out there. Let's do that. NHS pressure, it comes from, partly from 2/3 of people in Britain are overweight, and we have an ageing population. If we can all get outdoors more, if we can all live healthier lifestyles and keep healthier for longer, we release pressure on the NHS, which means shorter waiting lists for operations. Let's see if we can do this. The mounting evidence to show that exercise should be the fourth cancer treatment. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And we know it's true for many other illnesses, stress, etc. We need to make our outdoor environment accessible to people from the moment they step outside their front door. It's got to be easy to be part of our daily routines. Let's make that happen. Not just the NHS benefit, but economic benefits too. If more of us are working, we pay more taxes, so there's more public money for infrastructure. We've got more spending money, so local businesses benefit from more trade. The great outdoors will benefit all of society in so many different ways. Let's get the public access design right. Camborne, how to do it well. A perimeter bridleway with a hard, porous, gravel-bound surface, works in all weathers. Grass verges, radial bridleways and footpaths, links to other villages, country park, hilltop with a gorgeous view off the top. What's not to like? Let's do the same in our new developments. Bourne, not yet built, didn't have any existing public rights-of-way across this land. Thanks to the planners, that's being corrected. The new development will have perimeter and radial rights-of-way, links to other villages as well. So here we say well done to Countryside Properties and Mike Huntingdon for their work on this. Country parks, we do need more country parks across the county. Wimpole Hall now charges you £14 to park your car and go for a walk. But there's no bus service, it's a long way to cycle, so how are you supposed to get there at the moment? Milton, Wandlebury and Coton are all under pressure from visitor numbers. We don't have a Thetford Forest. We have here two potential sites for new country parks. Let's make these two new parks happen. Trumpington Meadows, another success story. Large open spaces, nature trails, dog walks, benches, access routes through, around, connecting across the M11 too. So well done everyone involved in that. Guided busways coming up. County's longest public bridleway at 18 kilometres, St Ives to Cambridgeshire. Here's the Pegasus crossing at Swavesey. Links into the new villages. Very, very popular for commuting. Very, very popular for leisure. Again, well done to everyone involved in that, how to do it. Conversely, Reynolds Drove Rampton about to come up. Recently hard surface with lethally slippery stone mastic asphalt, SMA. Now totally unusable by horses because you just slide, and no longer usable by anyone in icy, frosty or very wet weather because you slide, whether on foot or bike. Expensive to put right, and certainly not the quick win which the Greater Cambridge Partnership had hoped it would be. All due to lack of stakeholder consultation ahead of the work. We need to listen to our stakeholders. Let's do that. The next two slides show Warts Causeway here and then Limekilns Hill Road in a moment, which is the only way to reach Beechwoods and Roman Road from Cambridge. Fast traffic, high hedges, lack of visibility, no safe verge routes, blind bends, blind summits. Would any of you want to cycle on that? We've been asking the County Council for years for a safe route to be negotiated with landowners, compensated, and the funding just hasn't been there. This local plan, I hope, gives us a chance to remedy that. So let's make that happen. I'm ahead of myself here. Hard surfaces will always crack and subside over time, needing expensive repairs. Vegetation will always need pruning. This is the guided busway with the width reduced from 3 to 1.5 metres by reeds and willow overgrowth. Good design in the first place minimises the need for and the expense of maintenance. So let's be mindful of maintenance when we design our new rights of way. Fleam Dyke, absolutely gorgeous ancient public footpath, SSSI, open views, magical copses. But many of our other footpaths are wrongly recorded and should actually be public bridleways so cyclists and horse riders can use them. These all need recording correctly before the government's cut-off date, 1st of January 2026. Let's make that happen. Public access uses public funds. It's got to be inclusive. That means if you're mentally or physically impaired, mobility scooters, prams, pushchairs, hand cycles, horses, cycles, walkers, dog walkers, runners, we can design to make the countryside accessible to all. Let's make sure we do that. Ah, what a heartwarming picture. Now, who wouldn't want to smile and say hello if they saw this? Stapleford to Babraham shown here. The ability to have conversations with other people stops us becoming isolated. It's absolutely vital for human beings to chat with other human beings. It's food for the soul, so let's make sure our designs achieve that. The agricultural bill needs to re-include subsidy payments for farmers, like we used to have with the Countryside Stewardship Scheme many years ago, which gave us many local loops and links with farmers being compensated. Let's help that happen again. And finally, we all work better when we work together. That's why we're all here tonight. This was a joint campaign by Cycling UK and the British Horse Society, educating all users on how to pass each other safely and courteously. And it's a really excellent note for me to finish on and take a breath. So, be nice, say hi, thank you.
Sue, thank you very much. That was excellent. I think that we all agree that actually having access and getting out of cars is very important, not just for the climate, but also for our ability to improve health and well-being, certainly in our new communities. So one of our big themes in the local plan was around place, and we're very lucky in Cambridge to have, such a wide range of placemakers. Our next presenter is Meredith Bowles from Mole Architects, who's also a panel member of the Cambridge Quality Panel and a joint chair of the trustees of the CFCI, which is Construction Cambridge Industry. I think I've got that wrong. Sorry, Meredith. But you'll know that there's a few very good schemes, very high-quality schemes that we've seen recently, and one of the ones that's been in the news quite recently is the Marmalade Lane scheme, and Meredith was responsible for the architecture on that site. So without further ado, I welcome you up, Meredith, for your presentation, wherever you are. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you. If we're to act upon, rather than simply declare a climate emergency, this must be a radically different kind of plan. In fact, we pretty much have to tear up the rule book. We know that we aren't doing half enough. We know that despite all the hot air, our emissions based on our consumption have stayed the same, in fact, since the 1970s. We know that emissions due to transport are going up. We also know that the central government has failed to make national policies that make dramatic cuts in carbon emissions from buildings. So it's down to us now to make a difference, and this local plan can be a part of that. Of the new settlements that have been built already, 77% of people travel by car. We're about to add to this, as Stephen pointed out earlier, with an additional approximately 25,000 additional daily car movements in and out of Cambridge. That's on the already permitted schemes. There's been some fantastic work done on what a sustainable transport network might look like. But at the moment, it's unclear if you're a developer what to assume. Instead, they provide the necessary 2 spaces per dwelling and write a sustainable travel plan. But developers need to fit around a transport system rather than the other way around. We need a massively successful public transport that's regular and, has been pointed out, affordable. Cycling and walking must become a part of everyday life, with transport stops within 10 minutes walk of everyone's house. We need the cycling network implemented, providing safe, attractive, and continuous routes into town. The integration of the guided bus, local bus services, rural transport hubs, the CAM Metro, greenways cycle routes must be at the core of all decisions. Suburban low-density places made up of detached houses make it almost impossible for people to live within easy reach of public transport. This is currently what the local plan legislates for, low-density dwellings and streets made for cars, not people. The National Wellbeing Survey recorded that 62% of people value feeling well connected to people in their neighborhood. 77% of people value a neighborhood that feels safe to walk in at night. Developments that are denser encourage a sense of neighborliness, and this strategy is the advice of the Healthy New Towns initiative, where compact, walkable neighborhoods are fundamental to a place that encourages activity and social connectedness. It sets out the need for community hubs and the positive effect of co-located facilities. There are 60,000 new homes going through the planning system right now. No development I've seen has at its heart a proper strategy for a wholly connected system that relies on a series of interconnected modes of transport. Virtually all that I've seen are low-density car-based schemes. And why would it be any different without a clear transport strategy and system already in place? Aside from the university's land at Eddington, nearly every major development works in the same way. First, you get outline permission for the site, and then you produce a design code, and finally you sell off plots to house builders. But house builders sell products. They're not generally interested in creating places. They're listed companies whose sole aim to their shareholders is to increase profits. Why would they do more than is either required by law or that raises the value of their product? A design code might prevent bad design, but it can't on its own produce good design or great places. But there is another future built on a different set of values. In Zurich, they're aiming for 33% of the housing to be built by not-for-profit and owned and managed by the residents. The city ensures the not-for-profit developers get first option on development land. Last year, they won the World Habitat Awards, creating a whole neighborhood of 1,400 people, organized by the residents. In Berlin, they facilitate affordable citizen-led housing by zoning control and providing professional assistance to groups. Land is taken out of the general market, making it possible for local resident groups to build for themselves. In Hamburg, 20% of land is set aside in this way. Now, Cambridge can do this. It's the city that won the Sterling Prize for Accordia, in part because of the interventions of the then head of planning, Peter Studdock. It's the city which was led by councillors Sian Reid and Rod Cantrell that insisted on a passive house standard for developments at Clay Farm, and at Marmalade Lane facilitated the largest co-housing project in the UK. It takes political leadership to decide to change the status quo. We need the city to ensure an adequate electricity supply is built for a future supplying all cars and homes with power. We should have 100% passive house buildings. We should have a massive increase in affordable not-for-profit housing. We should have new neighborhoods that have community parks with shops and spaces for businesses and communities to grow. We need green infrastructure and massive tree planting. None of this will happen if left for the market to provide it. We've had 20 years of encouragement and exemplars. We've had a lot of talk. What we need is for local government to take a lead, to buy the land, to make the investment, to run the systems for the common good. We shouldn't wait for change. We should be making it happen. And this local plan is our chance to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Meredith, can you stay on? Meredith, can you stay? Meredith, can you stay on the stage or come back? Can I ask the previous presenters to join us on stage, because we want to have, if it's possible, to have the lights up a little bit, because it is quite hard to see from where we are about who has their hand up to ask a question. I think the plan is to try and use 15 minutes or so to have questions from the floor. Please raise your hand if you have a question for one of the speakers, and Paul and I will do our best to try and curate it. Right, there's a gentleman here at the... Oh, sorry, there's a gentleman there, sorry. Can you say who you are and who your question's for, please? Thank you.
My name's Shane Lawrence. I think it applies to the last gentleman, and also it generally applies to the aspect of legislation for this. You've indicated that nothing will change because of the current method of buying a plot of land, applying for planning permission, etc., going through the procedure. Local population don't get much of a say, even if it's rejected once, it will go through on appeal, etc. So it's almost as if no matter how much the local population, people want to input into it, it's almost a decision made from the start. As you say, the companies know they can override it and get it. So this is going to take legislation from a national viewpoint. I know this is going a bit outside of Cambridge, but doesn't it need a real push by all local authorities, so Cambridge, South Cams here, but all local authorities to get a change in this methodology of land purchasing and building? Otherwise, as you say, we're not going to get anywhere near Zurich and Hamburg and Berlin.
Okay, thank you for that. Meredith, do you just want to comment on that?
There are plenty of examples of local authorities in Britain that are already doing a hell of a lot to change the way in which, especially housing, is provided for. There was a slide earlier on of Goldsmith Street in Norwich, which is an affordable housing project for Norwich City Council. Of course, the City Council here is already doing that. I'm not suggesting that that we're not doing anything. I'm suggesting it could be much, much bigger. So there's different ways that councils have at their disposal to increase their ability to do their own developments, and that's the principle. The point I wanted to bring home is that obviously it's not all going to be able to happen with local authority, but it could be vastly increased. The one aspect is that the infrastructure has to be put in, and developers has to work around that rather than the other way round, which is the way in which more or less it currently works. And that secondly, that the local authority can be developing more than they already are.
Thanks. We take another one. We'll try and split it up between the front and the back. So this lady down here, if we can get to Ryan, thank you.
Hello, I'm Margaret Reynolds. I'm low energy architect, and I'd just like to put in a plea for better building regulations, of higher standard energy requirements, and a better understanding of the embodied energy in new materials, and help for people who want to eco-retrofit existing houses, commercial buildings and institutional buildings. The building control really needs to get up to speed on this.
I don't think there's I don't think perhaps we'll take another question before we ask people to answer that. Gentleman here, we will come to the back, I think, next for make sure everyone has a go.
All this is very well, but the trouble with the planning system is it tends to be a static system. It doesn't deal with the dynamics of human settlement. In other words, movement. You've got transport plans incorporated, but the planning system has a basic weakness here. Also, the other thing is that we have too many cooks spoiling the broth here in Cambridge. We really need to bring people together. We've got the GCP, we've got the Combined Authority, we've got the County Council, the district councils, you name it, Uncle Tom Cobley and all. What about a development corporation or a unitary authority?
Thank you. I can't possibly comment on that. Can we just take one more question? Because I think I'm then keen to perhaps questions for Sue and Tariq as well. Towards the back. Sorry, I can't see. There's a gentleman there standing. Thank you.
Thank you. David Plank, Trumpington Residents Association. As the previous questioner has said, it's all very well and fine, but what I'm finding, and my association is finding very difficult to square, is how all this will be achieved in a context where the authorities are envisaging a rate of growth in Greater Cambridge which appears to us to be unsustainable. the first conversation reads as though the growth will actually be determined by the market. Hence, the extraordinary figure in there that in terms of housing, the flexibility that is required is an additional 66,700 homes up to 2040. That's an increase on the present total of 55%. Now, obviously, there are choices to be made, but the government is pressing very hard through its local industrial strategy, and the various authorities are signed up to doubling economic output in this area up to 2050. So how on earth, when we are actually failing to deal with the present level of growth, how on earth are we going to cope in a situation where another 55% growth is likely to be added on top of that?
So, Terry, can I ask you a question which, thank you for those comments, which builds upon that, which is how do you see the inequality agenda perhaps being reconciled with, or can it be reconciled with this issue about growth?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about the impact of growth on inequality, and I've thought about it quite a lot, because on the one hand, one has to think about whether you can generate and continue to generate prosperity and wealth that you can then reinvest back in communities and public services. Public services have been starved of funding because of austerity and so on. But there's a fundamental problem here, and that is that the benefits of growth, whether you measure them in financial terms or other terms, don't necessarily stay with us. They go somewhere else. They get redistributed elsewhere. Now, you can argue that there are other parts of the country that are more deprived than we are. However, one of the things that we have to try and communicate back to the government, and we're not passive or weak in this respect, we're quite an influential, powerful city with a lot of great thinkers here. So we should be able to formulate arguments that are influential and can change policy. So what we're going to think about is developing ideas, proposals, principles, models, examples, as we have at Marmalade Lane and other places, about what an integrated, more equal community looks like, and how that can sit alongside a limited amount of growth that doesn't destroy everything that's valuable and good about the place. So I think that obviously the government doesn't necessarily listen, but governments change, and we in a city like this produce policymakers all the time. So the more we can make those arguments and influence future policymakers, I think the better chance we have of getting a better strategy for planning and growth in the future.
Thanks, Tarek. That's a helpful answer. So we take hands again. Could we have a microphone? Sorry.
Thank you. The last contribution was an absolute vital, profound thing, that we are suffering from the effects of economic growth at the present level. To double it and more, which is what both the local authorities here are signed up to, I'd like them to explain to me and to everyone else here why they're going for double growth.
So just to offer a bit of clarity, because I'm keen to draw Sue into the conversation. The figure that was quoted by the gentleman at the back is not the growth figure that the plan is currently working to. What we've tried to do is to illustrate that piece of work by the Combined Authority Mayor implied levels of growth, and what we've done is try to say that is a possibility from the Cambridge Independent Economic Review that was conceived of by the Mayor. So there are a range of growth scenarios that the document that we're consulting on at the moment references, but importantly, the work to determine that growth level and what's appropriate and deliverable is still ongoing. And one of the things that we're keen to try and do is to understand how we look at future decisions around what the right level of growth is for Cambridge, recognizing that the economy and economic performance of this region is a kind of national significance. And some of the challenges that it brings the planning process isn't going to, on its own, be able to resolve, but it's certainly got a contribution to make in that place. So it's an ongoing part of the conversation about what the evidence determines is the right level of growth, and absolutely understanding all of the points that people have made about the challenges that growth gives to successful places like this. But so I'm keen to a couple of people have referenced the disconnect that potentially exists. Can I ask you, Sue, a question about, you referenced some really good examples of where things worked. And actually, I'm really pleased that some of them were delivered through the planning process, so it's not totally broken. Could you perhaps highlight, in your view, what are the circumstances under which that can happen, or what you feel are the lessons learned from that?
For something to be successful, you need stakeholder consultation from the very beginning with all of the stakeholders, widest selection as possible, not with surveys which lead people to only be able to choose particular answers, but with giving people open questions and giving people a fair chance to come back and answer in the way they want to answer. Take all of that into consideration, take it seriously, and then address that. That's why the guided busway worked out fine. That's why Camborne worked out fine. As far as the A14 bridleways alongside go, I would have preferred them to have been set back with the grass verge between the old A14, now called the A1307, but I was told that wasn't possible. But you know, that's something I've been working on for a number of years. But yeah, we need to listen to each other and listen to the stakeholders and make sure we engage all the stakeholders in the beginning before we take action.
Thank you.
And I suppose I'd just like to say that I think it's important. This is the first time we've done an event like this, so it's going to be interesting to see what people's views are. But we have invited all of our speakers along to kind of produce their take on that and get us all together. And what the point you make, Sue, that we need to do this together and collaboratively, that is very important. And just because things have happened in the past doesn't mean they need to happen in the future. So I think Meredith's got a point on that as well, actually.
Sorry, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the questioners and challenge you a bit, Stephen, to your very measured response. And there were three people in the audience who said, what are we going to do about this growth? It's so enormous and we can't cope already. And your response is, well, we don't quite know whether there's going to be that growth and whether the speed is going to be that. You know, the figure I came up with is just going through all of the applications that are already in the planning system and totting up what that might be. So, you know, and they're all likely to go through. They're all, you know, well, it's most likely they're going to go through. So we do have a massive growth in the planning system. And I think people are right to say, are we ready for this? And my point at the beginning of my talk is we're going to have to really tear up the rule book and do something really significant. And my challenge is not particularly to you, but actually to the politicians, to the councillors who need to really get to grips with this really complex thing. There's a gentleman at the front there who said we've got lots of different authorities all trying to do things together. It's a massive issue that we need. To downplay it, I think, is wrong. It needs a lot of people to move together very fast in the same direction.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to be dismissive. I'm sorry, Meredith. It was just to say that the evidence and the figures is still work in progress. But you're absolutely right. And one of the points of this big conversation is to try and, in some respects, share the challenge and seek thoughts around potential solutions, some of which the planning system can do, some of which we've heard government and potentially wider issues of legislation need to also engage with. But we're all part of that conversation, and we and certainly the two authorities preparing the local plan are absolutely committed to try and drive this as far forward as it's possible to do at this moment in time, which is why we're here today. And the gentleman at the front there has got a question. Sorry, the gentleman in the purple. Sorry, sir. The gentleman in the purple top had his hand up for longer.
Just Ian Rawls, Cambridge Friends of the Earth. Just as an example of sort of, if you like, the market providing sustainability. I mean, given that I think most of the people on stage have mentioned improving public transport, I just wondered how the Greater Cambridge Local Plan intends to carry this out with the predominance of stagecoach basically. How is that going to happen? How are non-profitable routes going to be provided? Because some of them will be out to the villages. How do you square that with Stagecoach's predominance, or vice-like grip, if you like, over public transport in the region?
Well, I think it's a really important question about how we deliver the connectivity. And clearly, the local planning authorities and the district councils, the combined authorities, the transport authority for the area, and the mayor, I understand, has indicated an aspiration to review whether or not bus franchising is a way forwards. What I think the local plan process will need to engage with is how future growth, picking up on the points that Sue highlighted and Meredith highlighted, how future models of growth require less travel within the growth that is brought forward, rather than currently sustaining patterns of commuting from houses to employment areas and so on. So I think there's going to be some challenges in that space as well.
Is that likely to be provided? If you want to cut down commuting from the villages for the people employed in less well-paid jobs who have to drive in at the moment because the bus service either doesn't exist or is very poor, that implies more affordable and social housing in Cambridge City. How likely is that?
Well, the City Council currently has a programme using devolution funds to deliver 500 affordable homes in the city.
So that's going to solve all of
the local plan policies create affordable housing obligations within the
Do you mean
consensual
social or
process.
affordable? What's your definition of affordable? Because I believe it's about 2/3 of market price, which isn't really affordable for anyone. Let's be honest.
I mean, I think one of the issues that the local plan is going to have to deal with is housing tenures and forms and the breakdown between different housing mixes, because there is a broadening out, I think, of housing, an understanding of housing needs that the plan is going to have to engage with as we head forwards.
So that will include more social housing then? Yes or no?
Well, I think to deliver any of the themes, we're going to have to look at inclusivity really, really carefully. So it's one of the 4 key themes that we have, and I don't think there's any legitimate conversation that says that we can't look at the themes that we've put on the local plan. This is very much the first part of the conversation, and I think that to have a voice and an equal demographic voice of saying what's important to everybody is important, but that, to deal with inclusivity, we have to look at affordable. And I tend to agree with you. The term affordability is used loosely, and actually, to look at that properly, we need to look at the economy as a whole and not just the high end of the economy, and that's something that we really need to do through this process. But we are at the start, and that's why we're listening to voices now. Can we take some more questions from the back? Because we've got a lot of questions from the front, and I would like to take some from the back. Some people at the back who've got questions, put their hands up, because I don't want to leave you out. I'm going to go with this gentleman by the post, because he stood up twice. So I wonder if we can get a microphone over to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If Britain is to achieve a net carbon zero by 2050, and there are roughly 30 million homes going to be in the UK by that point, is there any reason that the council can't enforce passive or electrically heated homes in between now and then, given that we're going to have to remove gas central heating from many of those homes? Why not start with the houses that are being built now? Why are we still putting gas burning central heating in?
Thank you.
Meredith, do you want to?
It's quite a complex legal and technical issue, and it's a very live one. The degree to which local councils are able to counter central government legislation in terms of energy efficiency and building regulations. So there does exist the ability within local plans currently to ask for greater standards. And I think it's still a matter of debate as to whether that is going to continue. There might be someone out there that can answer that question. It's going to be withdrawn. So at the moment, in terms of when the political leadership we're after, I would say we're in a climate emergency, and if, in order to conform with the Climate Change Act, we're not going to be able to do it using central government legislation, which says that we as a local authority can't set higher standards, then someone needs to challenge that and take it to the High Court and say, we're, as a local authority, going to do what we think is required to reach, to fulfill our obligations under the Climate Change Act. So, you know, it's a hot topic, actually.
I'd just like to add to that. I mean, clearly there's a climate emergency imperative in making sure we have energy efficient homes, but there's also a poverty dimension to this as well. 12% of residents in the city of Cambridge can't afford to pay their heating bills. So clearly, if you can make houses more energy efficient and reduce heating costs, by eliminating fossil fuels, ideally, then we're going to help address the issue of inequality and fuel poverty as well. And clearly, fuel poverty can kill people sooner than climate change, although that's not to diminish the importance of climate change. So I think this is urgent in more ways than one that we deal with this.
I think I'm being told we've got about 4 minutes left for questions, so I think we can probably do another couple of questions in the meantime. I'm looking for some different voices. So for this lady here, I think over here, who's just stood up a little bit. I don't know if you can see her, Tom.
Paul will have this gentleman here, I think, because he's very patient.
Hi, I'm Kathy Mells from Northstowe, one of the new towns. Couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, I'd love to have some more co-housing in Northstowe. I was on the list for K1, which Meredith knows. First of all, I'd like to say that actually we need some more facilities out of town, employment out of town, leisure facilities out of town. It would mean that we wouldn't have to keep trogging into town every time that we wanted to go to work, go swimming, anything like that. And the other thing that I'm quite passionate about is to get some affordable transport links to Cambridge. I've had to pay £7 to come here this evening. That is not affordable for a lot of people. We have a lot of social housing in Northstowe as well. For myself and for those people, £7 is just not really good enough. Any comments, please?
Thank you. If we just take the other gentleman's question, and then I'll ask each of our panel to provide some final comment. Thank you.
Hello. Just a few things. I've been looking to get a house the last few months in Cambridge. I live in Cambridge the last 20 years. And I've seen the Cambridge city moving to a new level. Many new things happening in Cambridge Science Park, new developments everywhere. What I observed, though, is that those new developments are quite ugly cities, are ugly new towns that I don't want to live there. So if you see all the beauty in town, is all those buildings that have different colors, have different sizes. You create new towns that actually are quite irritating, say. So what you would look like is to get more self-build, allow people to have some develop A-grade energy efficiency homes. I went to a developer and asked him to upgrade my house. I was quite interested in to buy it. And I said, can you get from B to A, please? And he said, no, I can't do that. This is what you get. So why I cannot get it? So I had to buy it first, and then I would get it myself to A. So that's not right, isn't it? So that's why I believe what we need to do is create more colorful cities, places around Cambridge, and that you will need more self-build, people that have more taste, and then they have a huge developer that will do just grab the bulk and go, isn't it? So that's it.
Thank you. Very interesting point. If I can, so to draw this session to a close and thanking all of you before we perhaps have a 10 or 15-minute break, can I just ask each panel member to kind of sum up their thoughts from what they've heard in terms of the questions and what message they would want us as the authority and the representatives to take away from tonight?
Thank you. Consultation with all of us is really important, and as Meredith was talking about earlier, we need to actually drill down to the hard nub of the problem, the fact that we've been chosen this area to be an area of humongous growth and housing, whether we like it or not. It's been imposed upon us. How can we make best of that?
I'd like power to be put back in the hands of local authority representing us, the people, and the idea that we are beholden to the developers because they're the ones that have the money can be reversed. We're I'm speaking as we, represented by our own council, are the ones that permit places to be developed and change the value of the land from agricultural land values to development land values. And so as a consequence, we can decide whether or not we're going to have 40% affordable housing, 50% affordable housing, self-build plots, places for communities, places for business. That's what can be set as part of this local plan.
I'll touch on a couple of things. So first of all, buses. Councils used to subsidise the social bus routes that weren't commercially viable for private operators, and most of that's gone now. You know, it was all cut back, which is a tragedy. But if you think about it, the people who have to drive in from further out, who can't afford to live in the city, are the people that keep our companies going. They clean them, they maintain them, they run a lot of the services. They're absolutely essential to our health service, to our colleges, to our corporations, to probably every aspect of our city. So I don't think it's unreasonable then to ask those with the wealth, some of the big companies and corporations that are coming in, to subsidize those routes, because it's in their self-interest as well as in the social interest to do that. Secondly, if I could design my own house, it would look something like the Starship Enterprise, so probably not a good idea to ask me. But anyway, the point I want to make is that one of the issues about how you feel in a community is whether or not it makes you feel happy and comfortable and included. So if you create uniform, barren wastelands without community facilities, without centres, without a soul, that makes people unhappy. And making people unhappy makes them ill. Making them ill costs us money. So all of these things are connected. You know, there's no single thing that you need to look at in isolation. It's all about inclusivity and it's all about equality. So if we put that at the heart of everything that we do, we will save lots of money. We'll make for better communities and we'll make everybody better off.
Thank you, Tariq. And thank you to all of the presenters from the first half. We're vaguely on time, so well done to everyone for sticking to it. So we're 2 minutes over, but you've got about 15 minutes to go and get something to drink and then come back to your seats for 7:45, and we're going to do the second set afterwards. Thank you, everybody.
So welcome back. I'm hoping my partner in crime is not trying to stage dive somewhere. But welcome back, everyone, and thank you to all of those people who asked questions and spoke in the first half of the event. Now we're going to hear from some of the community voices across the Greater Cambridge area, and hopefully some really interesting, some really interesting and I'm sure further thought-provoking presentations. And to start with, I'd like to ask Wendy Blythe, and I think Will and Joe, who are going to accompany her on stage from FECRA.
Right? Okay. Today, almost 100 residents' associations and community groups are part of the FECRA network. That's a powerful grassroots civic voice dedicated to maintaining and enhancing Cambridge as a wonderful city in which to live, work, study, and relax. We asked our members to tell us what they value about Cambridge. It's not just the architecture. People care strongly that this is a city of neighborhoods, human in scale, with unique medieval open spaces and a river at its heart. Cambridge's informal green spaces with ducks, swans, and cows are admired all over the world. And it's this informal, semi-rural style that residents tell us they like and enjoy. In Cambridge, almost uniquely, the urban and rural mix and abut, and it's this combination that gives our city much of its special character.
Cambridge is a compact city, home to many strong, diverse communities. The universities, colleges, Arbury Christmas lights, Cambridge Market, Mill Road Winter Fair, informal football. Human in scale, Cambridge is small enough for people to belong and to make a difference. Quality of life is Cambridge's secret. The city's historic open spaces and its river engender a feeling of shared enjoyment and ownership. The vibe is reflected in both town and gown life.
Cambridge's unique environment has nurtured innovation and talent, supporting world-leading businesses, thinkers, and new companies. It's not just about science. Cambridge's success is built on its local businesses, communities, and its universities. The very qualities of life and environment that have made Cambridge unique don't scale. That same human scale that makes Cambridge a success is vulnerable. Ever-increasing growth makes a city a victim of its own success. The benefits seem questionable, but the costs are obvious.
Schemes proposed as a solution to transport problems cut bus journey times by minutes, yet involve the loss of trees, hedgerows, and green space. This ignores what makes Cambridge special and the Council's commitments to tackling the biodiversity crisis. Impaired quality of life threatens the most vulnerable. Residents are asking, why is there no assessment of impacts and issues arising from current and already approved growth at this stage? Why is no engagement with strategic environmental capacity issues as a vital part of the evidence base for the new plan?
Our river is dying. Despite heavy rain, it's the only river in the country that is not back to normal flows. Yet exponential growth fuels huge pressure upon our natural water supplies. Concerns about the impact of over-abstraction on the River Cam have been expressed, but large development keeps getting approved. There is gridlock at every level. Yet the current work on evidence for the local plan considers only housing growth. Why? What about environmental capacity, the impact of transport proposals, current growth ambitions, the need to address climate change, and Cambridge's historic environment before credible issues and options can be identified?
The shortcomings of Cambridge's expansion so far have been highlighted nationally. Inequality has not been addressed, and new housing developments design do not meet high standards. People have lost confidence in the planning process. Next slide. We have tried. Resident groups all over the city have recognized that Cambridge's success factors are uniquely difficult to scale up. Hundreds of people have attended meetings and marches pointing out that the cumulative impact of current growth ambitions must be evidence assessed before credible decisions can be made.
Turbocharged growth. There is no option in this plan to limit growth. Why not? Where is the evidence that it is necessary? And why is it that our civic leaders fail to question this or represent the views of their constituents? So what is the recipe to ensure Cambridge continues to have the right ingredients for success? We want Cambridge to be a sustainable green city which is inclusive for all. Only in this way can we continue to support innovation, science, and education, and be a leading hub for ideas.
This is a very engaged city. People care and want to be involved. Many good ideas have been put forward which are based on grassroots community participation. Will they be included in this plan? Genuine consultation has the best outcomes.
Attractive market towns on train lines near Cambridge could be attractive centres for knowledge workers and tech businesses. They have identities, a sense of place and character, and could benefit from investment. We need to share this prosperity. Where is the evidence that tech firms would leave if they cannot be crowded into the city of Cambridge? Tech businesses are now spread throughout the region, from Ely to Royston, Newmarket to St Ives. How can they best be supported? We need to build on our shared connectivity whilst maintaining our ingredients of success.
A sense of place and community is vital. New housing developments need to meet high standards, be inclusive, and recognize new ways to live that are environmentally sustainable. We have good examples in Norwich, where a council house scheme has just won the Stirling Prize for architecture, and also in Cambridge with Marmalade Lane. These are places where people want to live. When plans are sprung, fully formed on a community, it destroys a sense of belonging and being part of a continuing evolution of place.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Wendy and colleagues. Thank you very much for that. It's very challenging. We hear your challenge, and I'm sure we'll have some questions at the end afterwards. So now we've had some representation from City Group, represents all of the city really in their residents' associations. We're going to have some representation from our rural groups as well. So as you know, the new local plan is a joint plan, so it's not just for Cambridge, it's for the whole of South Cambridgeshire as well, which is over 100 villages and centres in themselves and have their own different challenges as well. So I'd like to welcome two groups that have come together to do their presentation tonight, and so thank you for doing that. So I'd like to welcome David and Richard from Fulbourn Forum and Terry from Cottenham 2020 to come up and present their item tonight. Thank you.
The western edge of Fulbourn Village is just over 1 mile from the city boundary, while 6 roads radiate towards its centre. There are less than 4,000 people living in the main village settlement, where a major expansion took place from the 1960s to the 1980s. As a fen edge village, it sits adjacent to the Gog Magog Hills.
The original 1860s Fulbourn Hospital has provided a site for major commercial development, Capital Park, which has contributed to the urban edge closing in on the village. Proposed redevelopment of the Darwin Hospital site for housing almost completes the connection, and they're all in the green belt.
The design guide, we got the wrong one here, got the wrong slide. Sorry, we've got the wrong slide here. That's it. The design guide stresses that Fulbourn should remain an independent village, separate from Cambridge, with retention and enhancement of its green environment and rural hinterland. The neighbourhood plan will reinforce this while setting the village and its infrastructure within the wider geographical and economic context.
Fulbourn is surrounded by green belt, being mainly intensive agriculture with minimum hedgerows and lack of biodiversity. The rooftops of Capital Park, which I mentioned just now, and the Ida Darwin site can be just seen in the first image. The aim is to prevent further encroachment.
Quality of life and recreation opportunities are enhanced by these two features in our parish landscape. However, their importance as linear nature reserves would benefit from better connectivity with green corridors linking them together through Fulbourn Nature Reserve and other biodiverse sites.
Springs at the 15-metre contour are now running dry. Together with the spring in the lowest part of the village, which is at 10 metres, these watercourses are part of the Cam Valley catchment area, flowing through to Anglesey Abbey and beyond. Extraction from the chalk aquifer and the climate change are taking their toll.
Borehole augmentation started in the 1990s. The wet areas are only there because of regular pumping, and East Fen pasture is a significant site for wild orchids. The situation is not sustainable in the long term.
Industrial units on the edge of the village have heavy vehicles regularly through the narrow streets, including at night, impacting on the conservation area and street safety. There are also routes to and from the Fulbourn schools along often narrow pavements.
The shortest high street in the UK has a good range of shops, but suffers from inadequate parking and regular congestion. More frequent and reliable bus services are needed. Cycle paths are sometimes either inadequate or non-existent. Vehicles approaching at 45 to 60 miles an hour discourages cycling.
As a route from the A11 towards Cambridge, the peak hours can bring congestion and pollution, and it's not safe to cycle. The dilemma of how to provide for cars in housing developments must be addressed. the resulting loss of village character is contrary to the thrust of the village design guide.
Just reflecting back on what Stephen said earlier, I'd just like to bring some time scales. Yeah. Yes, listening to what Stephen was saying earlier about climate change, global warming, etc., I thought I'd better put some timescales to it and look a little bit further than our noses, which I think is all that we're doing at the moment. I was invited to a beach party in Cottenham last year. I was invited to a beach party in Cottenham last year. Cottenham hasn't had beaches for about 700 years, but the villagers were there in their swimsuits, in their deck chairs, reading their newspapers, and it all seemed a bit strange, but I learnt more about it from our local XR people. I just want to do a very, very quick poll, very scientific this. Who's got teenage kids or pre-teen kids? It's very difficult to see who's what here, but okay. How about grandchildren? Okay, cool. Great-grandchildren? Wow, congratulations. Well, let's leave that alone for a moment and hail a TARDIS, jump in, put in those dates, year 1600 BC. It was a Friday, if I remember. And we land to see this scene. Noah's Ark launched on the noonday tide. The red top tablets at the time called it Doomsday Tide because it sells more copies, I guess. Fast forward now, something like 4,000 years, when scientists first began, or Meredith will probably correct me earlier, began to sense what climate change was going to be doing. And they forecast, there we are, they forecast 7 meters sea rise by the year 2006. No, that was when they forecast it. It was by 2100, by the end of the century. And you can see there what's happened to the wash using their figures. The Americans panicked. This wasn't just another Cuban Missile crisis. This was Armageddon. They ordered a nuclear-powered Ark 2, only 14 years later to find out that the scientists had in fact got their sums wrong on global warming. So they, oh, there it is. So they scrapped that, and it lies there out in the Mojave Desert, where the Russians couldn't see what was going on. It's home now to something like about 1,000 couples who naturally went in 2 by 2 at the time. So we move on now to year 220, when those pre-teen kids, teen kids are an average of about, let's say, 12 years old. And we're using this as the zero baseline for what I'm going to show you in a moment. Oops, I was going to say the map on the right shows you where we are, but I guess you all know where we are. Green is not very deep. Yellow is deepening. And red is, well, quite deep. Year 2100, that's base plus 80, excuse me, that's base plus 80. Can we go back one, please? Yeah, okay, base plus 80. And we move on to this, which is plus 80 years on the year 2020, where we have our kids are aged 92, great-grandfathers, great-grandmothers themselves. The sea level will have risen by 2 meters at that point. 6 meters, beg pardon. Something's not quite right here, Hannah. I can't keep going without the slide in front of me. No, 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 we're on manual. We're supposed to be. The one after the red one. But it matters not. It matters not. It's okay, don't worry. The summary at the end, all this is available on handouts. The summary at the end. Can we have the next one now, please? No, no, the one you had a moment ago. The chart, the summary.
The chart, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. Years on the left, 2020, which was our baseline, up to 2,300. And you can see the sea level rises in the second column. Forget about the 15 meters, that's too far away to even think about, I would suggest. The scenario going from today to beyond, as it were, and the temperature increases which are causing all this, running from 0 in year 0, which is 220 today, up to 9 centigrade. But in our lifetimes, in our children's lifetimes, we're really only talking about rises of 9 degrees centigrade with sea level increases of 6 meters. That'll put large parts of what is now the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority under quite a bit of water. And we're talking about planning for transport over the next however many years. We perhaps ought to add paddle steamers and maybe even seahorses to that. God knows. But we've got a problem and we've got to sort it out pretty damn quick. I don't think looking at zero carbon by 2050 is going to do the trick. That is treating the symptoms that's treating the causes rather than the symptoms. And if you don't start thinking about the symptoms now and how to build up our resilience to that, we are going to be very unlucky.
Thank you very much. Two perspectives, really. One around issues of resilience. It's not just about reversing the impacts of a changing climate. It's also about understanding resilience across Greater Cambridge area, and some really interesting insights from those impacted by change in smaller settlements than just Cambridge. I'd now like to introduce James from Cambridge Past, Present and Future. Some of you will be familiar with the work that they do. They've certainly been a consistent voice in the city over previous local plan processes, and I'm sure he has much to tell you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. We're a local charity that works through the planning system to protect heritage and green landscapes. We own and care for historic buildings and countryside, including Wandlebury Country Park, Cambridge Leper Chapel, Barnwell Meadows and Coton Countryside Reserve. We also run a successful programme of events and education for schools and the wider community. Did you know that there's a biodiversity emergency in Cambridge? I'm not sure that many people do, but Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire declared biodiversity emergencies in 2019. Biodiversity is the variety of animal and plant life on Earth, and a high level of biodiversity is generally important for the health of the planet and our own quality of life. The emergency was declared in response to the alarming decline in species across the world. Around 1 million plants and animal species are threatened with extinction. This isn't just exotic species in faraway places. For example, the turtle dove has declined by 93% since the 1970s and is at the risk of becoming extinct from Cambridgeshire and the UK, and the water vole has suffered similarly. So how should we respond to this climate emergency? This is something that we've been working on in partnership with the Wildlife Trust and other local conservation groups. Our ambition is to double nature by 2050. So that's pretty ambitious. So how are we going to do it? Well, we think we need a nature recovery network that's based around our main areas of habitat. So we need a green network that will link together places for nature and people, and it needs to be of sufficient scale in order to make a difference. So this will provide the space that wildlife populations need to grow. It will bring benefits in terms of mental and physical health. It will also help our areas be more resilient to flooding and droughts by storing more water on the land and in our aquifers. The increase in trees and vegetation will help improve air quality. Along with more fens and wetlands, it will help to absorb carbon and help to tackle climate change. And a green network will also make our area more prosperous by making it an attractive area to live, learn, or do business. So where should it be? We've started to map out where our existing habitats and landscapes are, and we think that there are 5 or 6 areas which are shown on this map. For those of you at the back, these are the fens to the northeast of Cambridge, the chalk hills to the southeast, the River Cam Valley and its main tributaries, the woods and farmland habitats to the west, and the fen edge to the northwest. The main habitats in the 2 areas of fenland would be fens, wet grasslands and woodland, and this includes Fulbourn Fen, Little Wilbraham Fen and Great Wilbraham Common, and the National Trust has a 100-year vision to expand Wicken Fen south to the edge of Cambridge. The Gog Hills is an area of chalk, grassland and woodland, which includes Wandlebury Country Park, Cherry Hinton Chalk Pit, Roman Road, Beechwoods and Magog Down. The River Cam and its river and tributaries link together the meadows, wetlands, parklands, woodlands, connecting Grantchester Meadows, the College Backs and many of Cambridge's commons, as FECRA showed on their slides. On the western side of Cambridge is an area of woodlands around Madingley Woods, Countryside Reserve and Burwash Organic Manor. And to the northwest of Cambridge, there's a lot of farmland, but not much wildlife or green space. And we think there might be an opportunity to create a new area there based on the old orchards and the fen edge habitat. So what are all these areas? Well, they're not giant parks or nature reserves. They would consist of groupings of individual parks, nature reserves, and natural habitats that are linked together by wildlife-friendly habitat. The majority of the land in these areas is farmed and is likely to stay that way over the short term. There will be opportunities, however, through the Agriculture Bill to create new areas of habitat on farmland that can buffer, connect, or provide stepping stones between existing habitats. So this is some of the mapping that we've been doing on the Gog Hills, showing woodland and grassland areas and how these could be made bigger, better, and more connected. And this is some of the detailed work that we'll be doing across each of the landscape areas. We think that there will be opportunities to create new nature areas and green spaces in each of the 6 landscape areas through a mixture of philanthropy, fundraising, carbon offsetting, and new housing developments. Many of you will know that new developments are required by government now to have a 10% net gain in biodiversity. We would like to see that 20%, but that creates an opportunity to create some new habitats. As well as creating new habitats, we also need to maintain and improve the ones that we already have, especially if these are impacted by climate change, disease, or invasive species. So many of our habitats require ongoing care in order to maintain their biodiversity. For example, meadows need to be grazed or cut if they're to remain as meadows. Unfortunately, the financial resources to create and maintain new habitats and green spaces are likely to be limited, and so it will be crucial to target funding where it will have the biggest benefit for nature and people. Later this year, we'll be delving into the detail in each of these 5 or 6 areas and mapping out where we think the best opportunities might be for creating these new habitats and green spaces. And we'll be talking to landowners and communities to see if they're willing to help. So how long might it take to create this nature recovery network? Well, although there's an emergency, unfortunately, this isn't something that can happen overnight. It will take decades to create this network, and we can only do it if everyone works together towards a shared vision. And that needs the support of local authorities, parish councils, government agencies, landowners, businesses, community groups, and all of the people that live here. Creating this nature recovery network is how we think Cambridge should respond to the biodiversity emergency. Including this green network in the local plan would be an important step in helping to realise a vision to double nature. However, it goes without saying that other aspects of the planning system also need to support this vision. For example, if there's not enough water in our aquifers, then our rivers and wetlands will dry up. These are 2 of our streams that were completely dry this autumn. Cambridge Past, Present and Future's interest in the local plan and the future planning of our area is not restricted to biodiversity and green infrastructure. We're also concerned about the scale and location of development, about the quality of design and creating sustainable communities. We also have a great interest in protecting and enhancing historic buildings and their setting. We have 11 development principles which set out our position on the future growth of Greater Cambridge, and these form the basis of our response to the local plan consultation. We've also published a series of blogs about the local plan and some of the issues that it raises. So you can read our blogs, our development principles, and our response to the consultation on our website. And if you'd like to help support efforts to create a nature recovery network, then please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. It's good to hear you talk about a spatial vision and committing to doubling nature. And we appreciate that we're working very hard with you throughout the rest of the local plan process. So, last but not least, we're down to the very last act of tonight, should I say. And I think we've saved one of the biggest ones for last. I'll just remind everyone, but this Cambridge local plan, or Greater Cambridge local plan, will be making a plan for the 260,000 residents that it will affect across the two districts. So we have 300 people here tonight, and we often talk about those who are more marginalised, who don't get a chance to say their views within the debate. And I'm really, really pleased that we've got some children here today, because actually, as Terry rightly said earlier on, the issues that we're discussing now are going to affect us all, but most notably our children, and I have children myself. So we're going to please welcome Nico, Harry, and Luana, and they're from Cambridge Schools Eco Council, and they're going to do their presentation now. So thanks, guys, and I'll hand over to you.
Hello, I'm Nico, 11, from King's College School, Cambridge.
Hello, I'm Harry, 10, from St. Paul's Primary.
Hello, I'm Luana, 15, from Parkside Community College.
Along with student leaders of eco clubs from over 30 schools in the Cambridge area, we are the Cambridge Schools Eco Council. The Cambridge Schools Eco Council is a council of students working on sustainability issues in over 30 schools across the Greater Cambridge area. We cooperate to raise awareness and educate on all levels about eco problems and solutions. We host climate strikes on the national strike days and any global strike days, raising awareness of climate change issues through the media and social media. We help each other to set up and lead eco clubs and events in our schools and communities. We work to ensure the student voices are heard on eco problems and solutions, locally, regionally, and internationally.
Our climate is in trouble. The last 5 years were the hottest on record, with global temperatures rising by 1.1 degree already. If this keeps up, by 2030, global warming will exceed 1.5 degrees irreversibly. And by 2050, sea levels will rise further, flooding coasts and low-lying islands. We're on a path towards a 4 degrees warming. If we can't stop this madness in time, what is the difference between 1.5 and 4 degrees warming for Cambridge? Well, as you can see, it's disastrous. With 1/3 of Cambridge underwater, these are our homes, schools, and...
So, in the UK, every community and every person's choices can help to stop climate change. So, 25% of emissions are from transport that pollute, such as cars, 17% of emissions are from meat, and 42% of emissions are from polluting energy. We need greener transport, greener diets, and greener energy. We are declaring climate emergencies for our schools. Our actions include, number 1, host climate assemblies. 2, teach about carbon footprints. 3, promote ecosystems education. And 4, transform into eco schools.
Our ideas for the Greater Cambridge local plan. Cambridge Schools Eco Council calls for the plan to create a local youth voice with a citizen assembly and a youth eco advisory council. Establish a climate advisory council with scientists, experts, and youth. Commit to carbon neutrality and resilience well before 2030. Go carbon negative.
3. Support local renewable energy. Finance and encourage solar panels, wind, and other renewables across Greater Cambridge, and teach youth how to build and use them. 4. Make all new existing housing sustainable and affordable, and scale up conversion of all roofs to living green. 5. Make local transport frequent, green, and free. Green all our buses and transport systems for zero emissions and reduce costs and increase reliability. 6. Track all particulates that affect children's health and eliminate local emissions that hurt our breathing.
Number 7. Plant for the planet. Increase local green spaces and community gardens and restore wildlife habitat that is threatened. Save our rivers. Work together to protect our chalk streams, groundwater levels, and even the River Cam. We are in a crisis as the River Cam dries up.
We are raising climate awareness locally. Youth Strike for Climate is held every month on a global days of action. Cambridge Schools Eco Council leads our Cambridge Climate Strikes. To share how we can spread out for our Earth, here is a short musical show from our first year of climate marches.
Friday, 3rd of April, we march again. Join us. A voice in the show. Now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay here. Thank you very much. And a message there, I think, for all of us in terms of not only the role of planning, but actually the role of everyone in this room in that future. I'd like, if possible, please, to ask all of the previous speakers to join us again on the stage so that we can perhaps ask from across the room a further set of questions for the speakers that we've just heard. Thank you.
And whilst you're coming up, I remind everybody, we've got about 15 minutes, just slightly over 15 minutes for questions. And we've got a couple of our team out there with roving microphones. We're going to try and get a balanced number of people asking. So please ask a question, make some observations too, but if you can just ask questions so we can make the most of the time, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, first questions up.
Anthony Carpen, I'm a local historian. Cambridge has obviously grown very, very significantly, but we haven't seen the commensurate increase in the amount of leisure services to match it. This wonderful Corn Exchange was completed in 1875, and it still is the biggest indoor space that we've got. So please, can we have a new concert hall that we were promised in the 1960s in the local plan? And can we also have a extended museum of Cambridge on that Castle Hill site, given that that's where Cambridge kind of began? Thank you.
We'll try and move it across the room. There are some people in the lady on the middle past the side, the doorway. Tom, in the pink.
Behind you, Tom.
Thank you. Yes, that lady.
Is it on? Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. Thanks. Fantastic presentations. What I found missing so far is any mention of food and agriculture. We're a city that's surrounded by agricultural land, and almost all of that is down to monoculture, which is the antithesis of biodiversity. I think that we really need to be tackling those issues as well as all the other issues which have been raised tonight. And then that then leads into the food that we eat, the food that we produce, and the procurement of food right across both this county and the whole of the country and then the world. It's more of an observation than a question as such, but that is a vital element which has been missing from the deliberations tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it? Can I ask James to comment, and then perhaps because the.
We did mention agriculture in our presentation and how we could switch to more greener diets that don't include meat produce.
James, can I just ask you to comment as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably we haven't mentioned it because it's something that the local plan can't really deal with. I mean, it's fundamentally agricultural policy. Obviously, the government is passing a new agriculture bill. What comes out of that, I don't know. The talk is that there will be, it will be public benefit for, public subsidy. So let's see what that means. But I think that's the local plan can't really influence agricultural development. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
I'll pass to Wendy. There is actually in the local plan, and this is a request in the local plan, is if you can identify landscapes or places that you consider are specific or valuable, then we are asking as part of the local plan process for you to submit your suggestions for those landscapes and areas that should be safeguarded or thought to be safeguarded through the local plan. But Wendy, you want to comment?
I'd just like to make a comment. This area, we've got a lot of policy which is sort of industrial style, agri-tech industries. And I think I'd like to see some joined up thinking about on the one hand, having farmland near the city, which is accessible for recreation. So I'd like to pick up on Sue Rogers' point earlier. But I'd also like to see that in a kind of organic style farming, also focus in the local plan. And I'd like to see some joined up thinking with relating that to what happens in our market, so that we're actually thinking about how that all works together in terms of produce that's available. That links up with what Katie was talking about, joined up thinking about food production, but also thinking about how that relates to skills and, young for apprenticeships and jobs. We've got to be thinking about a broader population, and this is not just about tech, it's about lots of different types of things.
Thank you. I think we've got one here, and I'm going to take it. Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry.
Just a quick point. I think there is an opportunity through the local plan perhaps to develop the co-farming principle, which has started near Sainsbury's in Cambridge by a small group, and I think that could actually be extended elsewhere. This would be an opportunity for more intensive use of the land and the creation of locally produced vegetables which have to be imported.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think just in terms of time, is it a brief comment?
Brief, yeah. On a very brief socio-economic note, and that is that East Anglia, I think, is referred to as the bread basket of the UK, England, but their output will fall from 35% to 25% as a result of global warming. And we're talking about 20 years' time, 30 years' time, 40 years' time, and growing.
Thank you. I think, just to respond to the point made, I think Sue's points as well around accessibility and the role of the countryside are hugely important. And one of the things we are keen to try and understand is perhaps we might want to start to think about some of the policy threads that we can develop through the local plan, through the landscape understanding and the evidence that we will inevitably have to gather that might pick up on a number of these threads. Paul?
I think we've got a question from Toomey over here, and we'll take that one next.
Hi, my question's primarily for Wendy and her group, but can also be taken on by anyone. It's just my understanding is that the local plan will need to have basically some kind of housing growth figure to get approval from government. Without yet that approval, you're sort of at the mercy of government and developers or whatever it is. Stephen Kelly did mention the figure, you mentioned it yourself, of something like 60-something thousand, which Stephen said is not a guaranteed figure. It's the point of this consultation to arrive at a figure sort of that most people are happy with. I'm just wondering what figure would you find acceptable?
Wendy, do you want to answer that? That's a bit of a leading question. That's a bit of a challenge.
I don't think naming a figure is helpful, but I would say that really what should come out of this session, I think, as Stephen wants, is for us to be clear about the aims. If there is going to be housing growth, it needs to be in a way which reflects our aims, and that's all about making it inclusive and fair and making sure, crucially, that it's sustainable. And I don't think it's wise, without all the evidence, to start naming figures at this point.
Thank you. Excellent. More questions, then. There's a gentleman there next to Tom. Oh, no? Thank you.
Thank you. I want to pick up on that last point. A couple of the groups mentioned environmental capacity, and it seems to me that one of the vital issues that hasn't really been considered is the capacity of Cambridge and its hinterland to cope with existing approved growth, let alone what is now proposed. You just have to look at the city centre, the fact that we don't have anywhere to put the number of bikes being generated at the moment, let alone what are going to be generated through modal shift with the greenways. What is needed is really serious baseline assessment of the existing situation to then test what the difficult choices are and what the possibilities are. It seems to me that this exercise at the moment, there's a study being done on housing, but there's a lot of other baseline information we really need now.
Okay. Can I take another question? Gentleman down. Oh, there's a lady next to you, Tom, but perhaps next time walk further.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I work at a biotech in Cambridge, and I've lived here for 5 years. Even in the short time that I've lived here, I've seen a lot of growth in job opportunities in my sector. Cambridge is a really attractive place for biotechs to move to because The name Cambridge holds a lot of influence, and it's good for investors, and that's why we have so many here in part. But we've thrown around the term affordability a lot tonight, and I just don't know if the council is aware that although we have a large number of life scientists in this town, life scientists generally are not paid very much. I myself earn less than 30,000. I'm not eligible for any mortgage for even a flat in Cambridge. The new flats built by the Marshall Airport are just under 10 times my salary. So when we're looking at affordability, is it affordability for everyone, including the life scientists who generally will be earning less than £30,000 a year? Thank you.
Thank you. There will be quite a lot of work, I suspect, looking at exactly the issue of affordability in the city and the forced travel that I think one of our speakers earlier on spoke about, in terms of the way that people on lower incomes are being priced out of the city. One of the challenges that we've got is how do we factor those that demand, but also the huge range of affordability challenges, not just for people on the lowest incomes, but actually for people on middle and what are above average incomes, who are still also priced out of the city, and what are our options in that space. I don't know if any of the speakers want to comment. I'm conscious of perhaps rather getting questions for the panel members and hearing their thoughts. Certainly, Tariq touched upon that point, didn't you? I think I don't know if you want to say any more.
Yeah, you don't have to be poor to be priced out of accommodation in the city. It's a major issue across young people who are trying to get on the housing ladder. It's almost impossible now. So we have a really complex problem to deal with here. There's a whole range of, as you mentioned, affordability issues and different types of housing that have to be affordable. We're having so many flats being built, leasehold flats, which are not always the most attractive proposition. And even those flats are unaffordable. They shouldn't be because they're smaller, but they are.
Thank you. I just want to, because I don't think we fully responded before we go to this gentleman down here who's waiting. We are currently looking at a huge number of evidence-based pieces of work that do incorporate all of the things that have been mentioned tonight. So it isn't just housing growth and economic development we're looking at. I mean, some of the key work is around the zero carbon baseline work, the inclusive growth and inclusive economy, and affordable housing and tenure. And it's a subject that the gentleman down here mentioned earlier on. I mean, to really have an interrogative look at what actually affordable means in the context of 2020 is something we will absolutely have to look at. So just to assure you, nothing's pre-done. We are very much at the beginning of this stage, and all of those pieces of work are going concurrently and will inform those numbers, just as all the other pieces of work we have to do will do as well. Down to this gentleman down here.
Thank you. It's Mark Ashton. I'm chair of Cherry Hinton Residents Association and a ward councillor for Cherry Hinton. Couple of observations first. If I put a pint in my pint pot, I can't get any more in. And I think a lot of people will find Cambridge is full now. I moved into Cambridge over 40 years ago, and the growth has just been unbelievable. And we continue to feed the dragon. And I think we need to get the figures sorted out to say, how much more growth can we take? Because after this local plan, there can't be another plan, because we'll have to put a sign up says full. And I understand we're being driven by government and not by ourselves. We've talked about open spaces. If Marshall's moved, there'll be 900 acres there, which would be available for people to walk to. A lot of these are the open spaces we've talked about around the city, which people have to get to. Not everybody can cycle or walk, so it would be people taking a car. If Marshall's move and we take the 900 acres for open space, we could make a fantastic country park there, which would be available to at least 4 local wards where they could walk to. So there are massive opportunities in this local plan. And finally, we've declared a climate emergency, biodiversity, water shortage, congestion. And our answer is to build all these amazing houses, which are going to be super amazing. And I came from the north of England, where we got rid of our communities because we built these fantastic apartments for them to live in with green spaces, which meant the mothers couldn't use them because they had to try and get the prams down and the bikes down. And 40 years later now, these lovely award-winning apartments are all being termed ghettos and slums and being ripped down, and we're getting back to more proper housing with gardens. So again, we need to think about what we're doing, because we only get one chance. If we build on these big open spaces, it'll be too late again. So I'd like to hear the panel's view on, if Marshall's move, why can't that 900-acre site be used for a woodland?
Can I, Councillor Ashton, if I can come back to that point, perhaps get people to comment along with a couple of other questions, because I'm conscious that there are probably only space for about 3 or 4 more questions tonight. There's a lady in the corner here.
Okay. Everybody tonight has mentioned practically about the aquifer level and the crisis that's rising from overuse. Who is in charge? Who can make a respectable difference to that, so that there aren't the amount of water isn't being taken off there?
Stephen, right. There's a lady, sorry, first. Can we hear your question?
This is just on the theme of joined-up thinking and more specifically joined-up action. I just wondered, out of interest really, how many Extinction Rebellion people were here tonight, and if there's anybody also from Cambridge University administration that's here tonight, because I think that's probably those things are quite important, that everyone's talking, that have sort of some power and influence.
You, question at the back. We'll come back to Stephen in the front.
Do you have a hand raised for Extinction Rebellion people?
Thank you.
And any from Cambridge University?
Not tonight, obviously.
Not tonight.
Question at the back. Question at the back.
Hi, my name is Phil. I'm a local resident and a developer, and I've heard a lot of rhetoric about developers being not caring. I would like to ask, so on many occasions as a developer we try and engage with local communities, and often we're rejected through parish councils and various forums. But I understand that, because there's been a lot of unplanned development. I'd like to ask the community in the general room, as a developer and a local resident, how would you like us to engage with you to try and get the best plan going forward? Because I want to make the best place that I live in and my children live in. But if we don't talk early and we don't start talking now, how can we plan going forward? So let's start talking early, but how would you like us to do it?
Can I ask, firstly, someone from one of the villages, and then I'd like to also ask our young people how they think you can engage with them in that process.
Well, probably the best way to engage is trying to for the council to take into account the work that's being done within the villages on the preparation of neighbourhood plans and the preparation of design statements, which we've had in Fulbourn. The neighbourhood plan is under preparation, and I would ask very strongly that is what is in the neighbourhood plan is taken strongly into consideration.
In Fulbourn, we've had a number of large developments and smaller ones. The consultations that take place with the developers are usually too late. They've already made those decisions. We're presented with a fait accompli, basically. We need earlier engagement with outline ideas, 2 or 3 perhaps ideas of how a site could be developed. Not something that looks on plan to be a final drawing. By then, the developer will not change their mind. They've invested too much money, and they're unlikely to make any major changes. So what I'm asking for is earlier consultation, not just with the parish councils, but with the people that live there who really know the villages back to front.
How can builders, developers, how can they engage with you? How can they hear the voice of younger people?
So I'd like to answer that question in a part where basically they can engage with us, because right now we can see mainly older people really using their abilities, but we could actually use children's abilities and to see what they think we should be doing to improve the life that we can show all together, and to actually help them to learn the crafts and skills of building and architecture in as they design the different buildings that they will be making in the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the main way that we connect with people is they sometimes see our strikes and marches in the news and think, well, we could contact those people. And we do get a lot of contacts, and we do get invited to go to places like these where people reach out to us and they say, well, would you like to come to this and speak about what you do? So that's mainly how we connect with adults and people, and sometimes they just come up to us on marches or something and say hello.
Thank you. Right. One more question, I think, is probably what we've got time for.
We're going to have to wrap up. So
No,
take one.
I'm told that's it, I'm afraid.
So I would say that this is the first time we've ever tried this, and it has been really interesting to hear your voices. But as I have said and Stephen said, this is the very first stage, and this is where you can get your questions to us. If you go to the website, if you type in www.greatercambridge.org local plan, you'll be able to engage with us, and we will look at everything. We look at all comments and all people that get involved. So please do go along to that. And I'd like to thank you all for coming along today, and thanking our panel, especially you guys who are up a little bit later than you perhaps normally would be. But thank you so much for coming and engaging with us. And I think a round of applause for everybody tonight, please. Thank you.
Can I, as you go home, can I also thank the team in my service and here at the Corn Exchange who've allowed this event, allowed us to hold this event. If you think this was a useful discussion, or you've got some suggestions about how we might change it going forwards as this plan and this program develops, please let us know, as Paul said, via the website. So thank you very much. Good night, everyone, and have a safe trip home.